Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session, Panel J, Open Science Advancements in the UAE. My name is Al-Walid Al-Khaja from Qatar National Library, and I'm privileged to be moderating this session. We're going to have a nice kind of journey of open science in the UAE, from talking about communities, talk about copyright, a favorite topic of mine, and then talk about open education resources, which is something I would love to know more about. So to get things started, we'll have Dr. Zain Hujaj. Wait for a second. And Dr. Zaina is a full professor in the College of Interdisciplinary Studies of Zayed University. She holds an EDD, so a doctorate in education leadership and administration from St. Louis University in the USA. Professor Hujaj combines expertise in leadership and curriculum development with a strong research portfolio focusing on educational technology, leadership development, and teaching innovation. So please help me welcome Dr. Zaina to the stage.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. All right. I'm just opening my notes 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Zaina, and I work at Zayed University. I've been at Zayed for about 12 years now. My current position is I am the Assistant Dean for Research and Outreach at the College of Interdisciplinary Studies, which is a relatively very new college, which was established at the university just a couple of years ago. I'm going to today talk a little bit about building cross-institutional open science communities in the UAE in the higher education landscape. I hope you enjoy the talk and be some value for you. All right, over the last decade, and we saw throughout the day, we saw that the UAE, well, I've been in the UAE since 2004. So I've seen how education has changed incredibly since I first came here. And I've been fortunate enough to do the round within so many universities in the country before settling at Zayed. So I kind of have a holistic view of, you know, the reform and the improvement and where we are now and where we were when I first moved here. So over the past decade, the UAE has invested massively in higher education and in research. And you know, we've built world-class campuses, all the new campuses, recruited global talent, and created an incredibly diverse academic ecosystem. But we're still at a paradox. The infrastructure has grown, but the collaboration has not kept up. It's not at the same pace. What's happening is our institutions now are working still in silos. Universities are pushing their own agendas. Everybody is very concerned about their own rankings. Everybody is competing for the rankings, competing for funding. They're trying to reinvent the wheel on their own. And, you know, this is not working. If we do want open science to flourish, we need to collaborate. It's as simple as that. It's not optional. It is actually essential for the universities in the country to collaborate. So today I'm going to try to share how we can move from the current fragmentation to some kind of a connection. You know, how can we build this cross-institutional open science communities that kind of need to reflect the country in itself, because we live in a very diverse country. We also need to serve the national priorities, and we also need to, you know, in true UAE fashion, set a model for the region. So, you know, it's really important. So to start, before we think about building our communities, I think we need to understand what's actually in the way. The problems, the barriers. The first barrier we have is the institutional competition. No matter what anybody says, the universities are competing like never before over rankings. They're competing for funding. They're competing for visibility. And we can see that on LinkedIn, like, those of us who are connected on LinkedIn, we can see, and we can tell which universities are pushing the hardest. So that competition definitely discourages collaboration, even when this collaboration could benefit everybody. So it's not working. The second barrier is policy and incentive, and there's a big misalignment. Promotion systems still reward individual achievements. The universities are still asking for single authored papers. They're not really valuing, collaborative research teams. It's not going to get you tenured. It's not going to get you renewed. This is sending a really bad message. It's saying collaboration is nice, but it really doesn't matter when it comes to the things that matter, which is, promotions and rank. The third obstacle is the digital infrastructure. Some institutions have advanced systems for data sharing, for archiving. Still, others are relying on, ad hoc solutions on the go. This, is a problem because we don't have common platforms for collaborations, and we don't have that. So, this stalls the technical improvement of the institutions. Lastly, the UAE's cultural diversity. While this is a strength, okay, it is also a barrier. We need to be very intentional about inclusivity. We must ensure that language, culture, and different institutional missions don't create invisible divides. So we are very diverse, but some institutions don't want to work with other institutions because on account of culture and language and all of that stuff. And so these are the challenges. But what happens when we actually try to break through them? I want to give a small example of breaking the silos in practice. I want to give an example from my institution. As I said, I work at the College of Interdisciplinary Studies. And every time I say this, someone says, what? There's a College of Interdisciplinary Studies in the UAE? Yes, and that's where I work for the past 4 years. So we had the opportunity to experiment with a cross-departmental and cross-institutional project. And this project brought together faculty and students. So it wasn't just faculty, and this point is very important. We must include our students. So faculty and students from different disciplines and different institutions and and different partner institutions. So within Zayed and external partners. So the idea was simple. Rather than every department pursuing their own research agenda in an isolated project, we created an interdisciplinary network around one shared research initiative, just one. And this was a pilot and it was an experiment. And what did that look like? First, we invited colleagues from neighboring institutions to co-design the research agenda. So we all got together, so different departments from my institution and the colleagues from outer institutions. And we worked together to design our research agenda. This by itself shifted the whole culture completely, because it wasn't our project anymore, even though we invited everyone. It was everybody's project. And we had the chance to work with other universities on shared grants as well. So funding came not necessarily from our institution. It came from other institutions who had funding at the time. Now, after we ran this short research experiment, the outcomes were striking. The outcomes were really good because what we saw was a higher quality of research output. Then we saw also a very strong student engagement, which for us was very important. Students told us that they felt part of a real community, that they didn't belong to University X anymore, like they were part of this research project community that included 3 universities. So it was something bigger. Of course, I'm not making it sound like it wasn't all rainbows and smooth sailing. We had so many obstacles. To start with the bureaucracy. I mean, it was incredible. the hurdles we had to jump through and the challenges, and it was so much. When we were trying to share data across institutions, when we were trying to get data from other institutions, even though we were working on a collaborative project, it was really, really hard. And so many papers to fill, so many permissions to get, so many people had to sign it. But we managed. We also discovered that aligning our schedules was a problem. Aligning academic calendar was harder than we expected, but again, we managed. In the end, what happened is it was a successful project. And here we go. This is our takeaway. It was a very successful project. And the takeaway that we came to was that when we put collaboration at the center, the benefits of this collaboration definitely outweigh the challenges that we experienced. When the articles started coming in and the funding came in and the publications started coming out and the quality of publications was so good, kind of everybody just forgot all the issues, all the stress of getting permission from this person, getting that person to agree and sign. So that experience kind of gave us a blueprint on for what's possible on a larger scale. And I would like to propose a very simple framework. And the framework is 3 parts. It's leadership, it's digital infrastructure, and it's inclusive engagement. So leadership plays a very critical role in driving collaboration across institutions by aligning incentives, establishing MOUs, and allocating resources strategically, not just allocating our resources. Leaders can create the foundation for meaningful collaboration. It's the leadership that sets the tone for the research output and for this collaboration that's going to happen. Rewarding collaboration as kind of like an afterthought, as what's happening now in a lot of institutions, is not, it should stop. It just should stop. It's essential to reward collaboration as an essential practice. We have to all collaborate because collaboration accelerates collective progress for the individual faculty, for the students, and for the institution as a whole. The second part is the digital infrastructure. Collaboration today depends on the strength of our digital infrastructure, the tools, the platforms we have, whether sharing the data, coordinating the project, or even just communication across the institutions. And these are the backbone of equitable collaboration, because we must have equitable collaboration, not just collaboration, right? So it's not just having these tools, actually, because most universities have these tools. It's about ensuring that these tools are accessible. And accessible, they're practical, and they're equitably deployed to all the participants, regardless of their contexts, regardless of who they are, so that everyone can fully engage. The next part is the inclusive engagement. Inclusive engagement ensures that the students and the early career researchers are not just participants. They are an empowered community within the scientific community, the larger community. They have to be empowered members, contributors, not just participants. Programs like mentorship initiatives, training opportunities, or even ambassador programs. These provide the scaffolding that helps young researchers grow, connect, and lead. Building this culture of inclusivity is purposeful. It's not easy. It doesn't come by itself. It's not something organic. We have to build it because this is the way we strengthen our pipeline for future leaders and future researchers, competent researchers and innovators. So where do we go from here? It's simpler than it sounds, but the map to building a UAE-wide open science community, we start with pilots. We start small, the way we tried. Start with focused initiatives, for example, a joint mentorship program, a joint research project, something small, okay? Or maybe a shared data repository, just a single theme. These pilots are very important because they prove what's possible, but they also build trust within the institutions and they build trust within that community of researchers. Second, we scale. Once the pilot has succeeded, we scale up to a formal framework and perhaps maybe a regional agreement, perhaps an MOU between the two institutions. So we start at an individual level, then we scale up. This creates a structure where collaboration is expected. It's not the exception to the rule, it becomes an expectation to collaborate together. And step 3 is consolidation. The long-term goal is a UAE Open Science Consortium, a national network that connects not just the universities, but also the government, the research centers from private and public sector, all connected together so that data is available to all the researchers in the country. That's how we can create sustainability. Sustainability beyond leadership changes, beyond funding cycles. It becomes a system by itself so that no matter who's in charge, that system continues to work. This roadmap is ambitious, definitely, but it's also very practical because each step builds on the step before it, and it ensures that it's building a resilient community. So, recommendations. How do we get there? We, as the UAE, we must leverage our diversity as a strength. Building inclusive cross-institutional collaborations in the UAE that reflect the country's rich cultural and institutional diversity. This is very important. Everybody must be represented. Second, we invest strategically in open science. So we have to channel funding. We have to channel resources into digital infrastructures, into training, into incentives that enable equitable participation. Third, we start small and we scale smart. We should pilot collaborative projects with measurable impact. And then after that, expand and replicate, successful models across different institutions. And then it just kind of grows by itself, step by step. We form a national consortium. We consolidate efforts into a coordinated national platform that aligns policy, infrastructure, and incentives. And finally, we lead regionally and globally. The UAE is always aiming to be the best, the first, the most. We like superlatives. So we position the UAE as a hub for open science in the Arab region and a model for best practices worldwide. If we take intentional steps, start small, scale smart, and consolidate, I think this is very, very possible because collaboration is no longer a choice for us. It is a key to unlocking our collective potential. At this time, collaboration is essential for everybody's growth. Thank you. Any questions? After? Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, and this is my contact information.
Thank you, Dr. Zaina, for that. It was very interesting and clear presentation. And a good example of, I hope I get the pronunciation right, interdisciplinary. Always okay. And I'm sure many of us have many questions and we'll wait in the end. With our next presentation, we have two speakers, Veronique Lecat and Thomas Hodge. Veronique Lecat is the cataloging and metadata librarian at the American University of Sharjah. She contributes to the university's copyright and repository teams, advancing open science, open access initiatives, and promoting the responsible use of content. Veronique earned her MLS from McGill University in 2012 and previously worked at the Canadian Museum of History and the Library of Parliament. And Thomas Hodge. Thomas is the Associate University Librarian for Technology and Technical Services at AUS, and he has worked here in Sharjah since 2007. So please welcome the two speakers. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our talk on navigating a new copyright environment, localizing open access and licensing practices in the UAE. So everyone's favorite topic, copyright, and those of you working in the UAE, you may be familiar with some of the changes currently going on. So I want to start by having you consider some everyday practices, at least every day if you are working in a university. Let's think about faculty distributing class handouts, instructors posting articles on a library learning management system like Blackboard, and students making copies of an article or a chapter for a group study session. All of these practices rely on educational or fair use exceptions to copyright laws. The question is, are they applicable in the UAE? So a little bit about us. My name is Veronique Lacat. I'm the cataloging and metadata librarian right here at AUS. And part of my job is working on the copyright team, organizing course packs, answering questions. I've been at AUS since 2014, so it's been 11 years already. And joining me, he'll come up to speak in a little bit, is Thomas Hodge. He's my boss, actually. And he's been at AUS since 2007. He's from the United States. He's previously worked in Guam as well as in Qatar. And when he came here to become our AUL, one of the first things he was handed was copyright and answering questions and working on the course packs. So in this presentation, I'd like to show you how copyright has changed in the UAE and why ultimately this strengthens the case for open access and Creative Commons licensing. I'll start with talking about where UAE copyright was before 2021, and then get into the turning point in 2021, which is the new UAE law. And Tom will talk about the rise of collective management organizations in the UAE. And I'll conclude with why open science now matters more than ever. So before 2021, I like to call it a vague copyright landscape. Perhaps it wasn't that vague, but at least to us trying to interpret the law, we felt like it was a bit vague. So a bit of a timeline of copyright in the UAE. There were laws before 1992. I think there was one in the 1970s. There was one in the 1980s. It's beyond the scope of this presentation. And honestly, they're just in Arabic, so I can't read them anyways. But in 1992, we have federal law number 40 on the protection of intellectual works and copyright. And I just put a little point that AUS was founded in 1997. So that 92 law was in place when the university was founded. 2002, we have a new law, number 7, on copyrights and neighboring rights. 2004 was when UAE signed to the Berne Convention, which brought the UAE laws into alignment with international standards. In 2006, we have an amendment to the 2002 law. And then I just put a point that Tom and I joined between these, him in 2007, me in 2014. So that was the law in place when we both came to AUS. And then 2021, Federal Decree Law number 38 on copyrights and neighboring rights. And right after that, 2022, we have the founding of the Emirates Reprographic Rights Association, also called ERA, which is the first collective rights management organization in the UAE. So when we look at that 1992 law, when we read it, we see that there's educational exceptions. And I'll just pause here to mention neither Tom and I are lawyers. Nothing we're saying in this presentation should be at all interpreted as legal advice. This is just our opinion, our interpretation. And another note, neither of us speak Arabic. The official version of all of these laws is the Arabic version, and we're just interpreting the English versions. So just mention that. But going back to the 1992 law, if we look at Article 16, the way we read it is that there are educational exceptions. It states public libraries, non-commercial documentation centers, educational institutes, and scientific and cultural institutions may, without the author's permission, copy the protected works by photographing or a similar method, provided that the copying and number of copies are limited to the needs of their activities and doing no harm to the financial exploitation of the works, and also do not cause harm to the legal interests of the author. So the way we see that, you can make copies as long as it's reasonable and you're not harming the author. Perfect. And then we have the 2002/2006 laws, and there's 2 articles in there that are of interest. The first one is Article 21, which states that a person may file an application at the ministry, and they're talking about the Ministry of the Economy. They may file an application to obtain a compulsory license to reproduce or translate or reproduce and translate any copyrighted work under this law. Great, that's great to know, but when we read that, we don't know how to go about asking the ministry, to be honest with you. Is there a phone number? Is there a form online? We just don't know. So we can see that, but we don't know how to act on that. And then we have Article 22, which covers all of the limitations and exceptions. And I'm just going to point out a few that were of interest to us in the library, that people may make, or they may not be prevented from making a single copy of the work for non-commercial or personal use. That's an interesting phrase, non-commercial personal. Does that include research? Does that include educational purposes? We would say it does. It's personal use. It's not a commercial use, but that's up to interpretation. Also, a nonprofit, whether direct or indirect, documents or archiving center, library, or attestation center making a single copy of the work provided as follows. A, that the copying is done to preserve the original copy or replace a lost, damaged, or worn copy, and no replacement could be obtained on reasonable terms. Not sure exactly what reasonable terms might be, but if I'm replacing a copy and there's one on eBay and it's $5,000, is it reasonable to purchase that? I don't know. Or B, that the work being copied is at the request of a natural person for use in connection with studies or research. This should be done once and at staggered intervals in the event that a copying license could not be obtained in accordance with the law. So that's where you have that phrase about the copying license, which is referring to the previous article. But again, we don't know how to get a copying license. So what was common practice at this time, at least at AUS, and I think at many other universities in the country? We modeled our copyright guidelines on US fair use. Why did we do that? UAE copyright existed, but we were unclear about a number of things. For example, how to ask the ministry for a license, whether non-commercial personal use included educational or research uses, and what reasonable terms mean in terms of purchasing a replacement copy. And there were added considerations. At AUS, we're chiefly teaching in English. Most of our materials are published in the United States or in the UK. And in those jurisdictions, they do have educational exceptions. So it was reasonable to think that they weren't going to go after institutions using educational exceptions, because those exceptions existed in those jurisdictions. So it's very unlikely that they were going to get sued. And we weren't getting sued. We hadn't heard about any other universities in the area getting sued for using these kind of exceptions. So it was in our mind. Also consider that we were following established practices at the institution. So you come into an institution, they're using fair use exceptions already. It makes sense that you continue to do so. And also importantly, the simple fact that US copyright law and fair use are easier to examine. You go online, there's so many websites providing guidance. There's a plethora of case law that exists that can tell you, for example, it's okay to copy one chapter, or it's okay to copy 15% of a work, or whatever it is. So because there's so much guidance that exists, it's easier to follow those guidelines. All of these things worked in practice, but they did lack a firm local legal basis. And then comes 2021, and here we have a turning point. We have a new law that's published, completely replacing the 2006-2002 law. And this is Federal Decree Law number 38 of 2021. And of course, we read the new law, and when we did, we interpreted it as no big change, and we continued doing as we did before. We have the same Article 21 with the mention of compulsory licenses. They just have that added text of without the author's consent. So you can ask the ministry to grant a compulsory license without the author's consent for reproduction and or translation of any work. And Article 22, largely the same limitations and exceptions, that the author, after publishing his work, may not prevent third parties from making a single copy of the work for personal and non-commercial or professional use of the copier. So it's similar language, slight rewording. Make a single copy of a work with acknowledgement of a documentation or archiving house, libraries, or documentation centers, which do not seek direct or indirect profit. That's an interesting phrase, with the acknowledgement of. We weren't quite sure what exactly that meant. Is it legalese? Is it a weird translation from the Arabic? So in the following cases, for the purpose of preserving the original version or to substitute a version lost, destroyed, or become unusable, and it is impossible to obtain a substitute thereof based on reasonable conditions. Or B, the purpose of copying must be in response to the request of a natural person to use it in research or study, provided that the same is made for one time or for interrupted periods of time where copying license became impossible in accordance with the provisions of this decree law. So the real change happened in 22 when we have the founding of the Emirates Reprographic Rights Association, which Tom will talk about because he's been dealing more with them. I'll just stand over here. Yes.
Fun. Okay, as Veronique said, I've been involved in discussions with our collective management organization, which was established in 2022. The Emirates Reprographic Rights Management Association. The hard part is learning to pronounce reprographic. All right, but suddenly you're talking about birth control and they contacted us in probably late 22, early 2023, and we met with them for the first time in February 23, I think. Yeah, February 23. Now, they contacted, I think, most of the universities in the UAE at that time, had preliminary meetings. The discussions were interesting from our standpoint because they talked a lot about photocopying. And of all the potential avenues of copyright violation happening on the university campus, photocopying, it didn't really strike us as probably the major problem. So we had a very interesting discussion with them that revolved a lot around the smallness of photocopying and the largeness of library licensing, and were there problems with the licenses and the compliance with the licenses. I think they found that quite interesting, and because we didn't hear from them for some time after that. I think they did a lot of revisiting of what they were doing and how they were thinking about this whole thing. They reappeared actually in late 2024, September. They contacted our chancellor's office. Cara Jones and I had a meeting with a large delegation from ERA, as well as the chancellor and some other people from AUS. I believe the provost was there. And there was, I think, another meeting about a month later. And again, these were very interesting. We had spent the whole time reading the law, as Veronique was talking about, and seeing where's the big problem. Personal use, it must be kind of like fair use, except maybe a little more limited or something. But in the course of these meetings, we came to realize that in the terms that ERA was putting this out, personal use or educational use is not personal use. If it takes place in an institutional for a business context, which is how they think of education, it does not fall within the exceptions of the Act. And, you must be licensed in order to do it. we had, and again, this was interesting. We had some further sessions with them. They had a reception in October of 2024. Again, we learned more about it, and then a conference took place in February 2025. And this is where they produced this marvelous little guide, which just, in terms of our ability to understand what the heck this law actually was saying, get a copy of this. It's very, very useful. It lays out, there is no fair use in the UAE per se. There are the exceptions that are in the act, and that's it. If you're relying on fair use at this stage of the game, you need to rethink this and probably talk to ERA if you're in the educational business. We've been having, starting since March, we got a copy of the license in the course of these previous discussions and their events. And it kind of started formal negotiations in March of this year. There's been a lot of back and forth. I think, again, on both sides, we continue to learn a lot more about what the other ones are talking about. I think one thing that really struck us was, again, they don't seem to have a lot of background on library licensing and understand the extent to which electronic resources can be used for a lot of things, not within a traditional copyright context, but okay, here, this license lets us do interlibrary loan, for instance. This license lets us do course packs. Not many of the licenses allow that, but a few do. And any use that a student makes for educational purposes, I can't think of a license where it's not legitimate. So again, we've had a lot of back and forth with them. Single-use licenses where we buy something for a particular user and it's only for that user. Harvard course packs. I think this one was new at the discussion where it came up with them. No, even if you have the ERA license, you can't make more than the one copy for the distribution to that student. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Again, these are the big things that, where the lights really went on. The lack of fair use in an educational setting, and the fact that the 2021 law was aimed at part in enabling the formation of CMOs, common management organizations. Yeah. So anyway, that's been our interaction.
So it was a big paradigm shift for us to get our heads wrapped around, okay, we have to get this license with ERA in order to do a lot of these educational, things that we considered allowed under the law, but apparently they are not. So I'll bring this back into the broader conversation to conclude why open science matters more than ever. So as you can see, copyright protections and collective management organizations are expanding in the UAE, and perhaps we'll see them expanding in other countries in the region as well. And without educational exceptions, we can see that most uses or many uses do require an actual license. Open access and Creative Commons licensing allows authors to maintain control and enable reuse across borders. For example, with CC licenses, it supports sharing, reuse, teaching use with those customizable restrictions, for example, preventing modifications or commercial reuse. So we should be encouraging our faculty and researchers and scientists to consider publishing open access where possible, using green open access, which means depositing in a repository, and applying CC licenses strategically. These choices will keep research usable and accessible in an increasingly restrictive copyright environment. So to conclude, in the past, we were relying on fair use exceptions. In the present, we see that the law has been clarified, ERA has been established, and institutions right now, as we can see, are in transition, getting used to these new laws. And in the future, open science is the key to sustaining access and openness. And I'll just mention, these are the sources. So the sources of the laws that I got. And at the bottom, I have the website for ERA. So if you are looking for a copy of that copyrights guide, you can contact them at that email right at the bottom. I don't believe this is available on their website. I think you would have to contact them to ask for a print guide, and it's a very interesting read. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronique and Thomas. I wonder if copying the booklet is for use or is not. No, it's not. I really enjoyed that. There was really nice narrative, and the storytelling was great, and like this, it was quite suspenseful to know what Era was doing. So I have some questions, and I'm sure the audience also have some questions once we come to the question and answer or panel discussion. Next, we have Fiona Glasgow. Fiona is the Scholar Communications Librarian at American University of Sharjah, where she leads initiatives in research impact literacy, open access, and bibliometrics. Fiona's work focuses on practical strategies for increasing research engagement, strengthening scholarly communication practices, and advancing open access across institutions. Fiona is a photographer as well from our discussions. Fiona, please come in.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I thought I was going to be totally disappearing behind this podium, but actually I feel like I have a pretty good view of the room from up here, so that's good. So I'm very happy to come and talk to you today about my little project that I've been running at AUS for the last couple of years. Do I need to stand here so you can hear me better? Okay, sorry, I move around a lot when I talk. Which is something called the Research Impact Challenge. Now, if you're a librarian, you might have heard of these from time to time. They're a pretty popular thing. So I'm going to talk about why I run it, what research impact is, and then what research impact literacy is. And yeah. This is what we'll talk about. I'll give some context. I'll talk about research impact challenges themselves. I'll talk about how I designed and implemented this challenge here. I'll tie it back into the presentation or to the conference theme of open access, and then there will be time for everybody to take questions. So why is research important? This actually isn't a trick question, and it's kind of the wrong question that I'm asking you. Because actually I think I want to ask about how is research important more than anything else. We all know research is important. It advances scientific goals and all of these amazing things in our society. But if it exists in a vacuum, then it's not going to have the impact that it needs to be good research. So when we talk about why research is important, it comes down to research impact, which is an effect on, change, or benefit to the economy, society, culture, public policy or services, health, the environment, or quality of life beyond academia. And it's really that beyond academia part that I kind of focus on most in my role here. I'm Scholarly Communications Librarian at AUS, because I think that's really important for our research to get kind of outside of this academic bubble that we can live in and actually impact our society in hopefully positive ways. So research impact invites researchers or other stakeholders in the researcher process to value impact beyond those traditional citation-based metrics, which are also important. I'm also a metrics girl, but I think, we can have some variation there. And crucially, I think a shared understanding of what research impact is enables that impact to be generated and demonstrated more effectively. So that's where the concept of research impact literacy comes in. So you might be familiar with information literacy or data literacy or AI literacy. Research impact literacy might be a little bit of a smaller scale topic for now, but there's a couple of researchers, Bailey and Phipps, who've been working on it for a while. And this is the definition that they've come up with. Research impact literacy is the ability to identify appropriate impact goals and indicators, critically appraise and optimize impact pathways, and reflect on the skills needed to tailor approaches across contexts. And they do break it down a little bit further than that. So in their article, they break down research impact literacy to these different sectors. And it's only when all of these areas overlap that a person, a researcher, or an institution would be considered impact literate. So they talk about the how, the processes and elements by which impact is achieved, They talk about the who, the skills and people-based factors which facilitate achievement. And they talk about the what, which are those actual demonstrable benefits of impact. And so you can see in the middle there, when you have all of them, that's when you're literate. They also talk about the kind of gaps when you only have two of them. So if you have how and who without what, that leads to insufficient understanding of the ultimate impact indicators, evidence, and assessment. If you have who and what without how, that leads to insufficient understanding of the bespoke and nuanced processes by which impact is achieved. And if you have how and what without who, it leads to insufficient understanding of the roles and skills required to plan, generate, execute, and assess impact, and results in poorly informed and unsupported impact strategies. So they're all crucial, and they need to have all of them to overlap so that you can be considered impact literate. So really, this is my last slide on impact literacy. Someone is research impact literate when they know how to create impact, when they know what impact can be achieved, articulated, and evidenced appropriately, and they understand the skills needed by research impact practitioners to effectively navigate that how and what. So at AUS, I wanted to address this gap in research impact and research impact literacy. One of our strategic goals or values here at AUS is to grow the impact of AUS research and creative work, thereby empowering our researchers to understand and communicate impact. I think we should go even further than that. I don't think it should just be on our researchers to be impact literate. I think it should come down to everybody that's research adjacent. So that's everybody in our kind of main building administrative policymaking things. We should all be impact literate. We're at a university. And so I've created an open modular series of, I call them the Research Impact Challenge modules. There's 8 modules, and I'll show you those in a moment, to kind of address these different little areas to help our researchers and research adjacent staff, students become more impact literate. So a little bit about research impact challenges in general. They've been around for a while, over a decade, kind of created by a woman called Stacy Conkiel in 2014. Originally started as a blog, which she then adapted into an ebook, which is available for free online. And she really hoped that the self-paced learning would appeal to busy faculty, breaking it down into little chunks that they could do day by day if they committed to her challenge. It has since been adapted by academic libraries around the world. So if you do a Google search for Research Impact Challenge library on Google or something, you'll just get pages and pages of results of different academic libraries around the world who have adapted this text into their own version of the Research Impact Challenge. They tend to range from around 5 to 30 days worth of activities. I think 30 is quite a big ask for faculty who are already busy doing other things. But these short tasks, or AKA challenges, get researchers thinking about their work and the impact that it has and kind of the challenges over that designated timeframe. So at AUS, you can see this little video of what our modules look like, and I can open those up maybe later on. They're built in a tool called Rise 360, which allows for interactive and self-paced learning. You can see me kind of moving through some of the interactive elements there. And it's primarily aimed at faculty, research, active or adjacent staff, and graduate students. So these are the modules that I cover in the Research Impact Challenge. The first one is just simply trying to explain what research impact is, why you should want it, and how you can get it. So it goes over things like planning, impact planning tools, the different kinds of impact you can have, and kind of gives an introduction into the rest of the modules. Scholarly identity goes over those common scholarly profiles that researchers can have, because an important way of having impact for yourself is making sure that your work is appropriately accredited to you. People can find your research and find out who you are. The third module talks about social media. So how to utilize social media to effectively share your work online, hopefully making it more findable, more accessible. AI tools for research. This is the most recent one that I added. This came along in 2024. I would say that AI isn't really itself a research impact tool. but I was hoping by introducing some of these key tools into the modules that researchers could make the research process a little bit more effective and have a little bit more time to do things that they valued more, maybe share their work on social media more or something like that. So 5 is publishing for impact. So it's a pretty crucial step in publishing to make sure that you're choosing an appropriate venue for your work, whether that's considering if you work in a really niche area and you need to publish in the right journal to reach that target audience, or if you're looking for a Q1 journal. If you're looking for a book publisher, this module helps researchers kind of break that down. Open access publishing, the best one, obviously. I talk some about gold open access publishing models, but I focus a lot on green because I'm a huge proponent of green open access. We have our institutional repository here at AUS, which we get a lot of, try to get as much research into that as we can. I talk about metrics and alternative metrics. I do think citation-based metrics are important, even though they have some issues. So I do talk a lot about responsible use for metrics in this module as well. And alternative metrics, they're an interesting one because they are supposed to help you evidence that outside of academia impact, but really kind of comes down to still being a quantitative metric. So talk about those two and some of the pitfalls that has come out of alternative metrics. The last one, what is your impact? Really just invites faculty or the participants to think about what impact means to them, what it could mean for their research, and how they can kind of actively plan to get it in the future. So the development of my research impact challenges began in 2022 as a LibGuide. They were redeveloped in 2023 using RISE 360 to make them an online interactive course. Added that module in 2024 around AI tools. And then in 2025, I recorded some video introductions for each of the modules as well, just to kind of set the scene for everybody that was completing them. Implementation. If anybody wanted to run something like this at their own institution, I don't know how many people we have from individual universities here in the crowd, but these are some of the steps that I would consider if you wanted to implement something like this. Finding the right time is pretty crucial. It works out really well for me here at AUS. We have a 4-day work week and I have 8 modules. So that's 1 a day for 2 weeks, which works out really well. I run these during the spring semester because it's a little bit quieter. And I try to avoid things like Ramadan, for example, when people have other priorities, a little bit more distracted. I promote this via any university channel I can get my hands on. We have fantastic library social media accounts that we share things on. We have digital signage within the library. We have a monthly newsletter that we send out to faculty that I put it in. Then with the broader university, we promote it with our research office and with our Graduate Students Association as well. I get people registered so that I can send them emails daily to those registered participants with a link to the day's module and sometimes an additional reading or some other little task that they might want to consider completing. Then at the end of the challenge, I send out a feedback form and then I write an annual report. Has it been a success? Yes. I have had a yearly increase in registrations, which has been really gratifying. I guess eventually the goal is that maybe these numbers won't go up because everybody will have completed it. So I don't know what to do at that stage when we hit like 350 people having completed it. I don't know, maybe we'll have to do another one. And it's a pretty good mix of students, staff, and faculty. This year was the first year we had some undergraduate students joining, and I'm not going to turn anybody away, so they're more than welcome to join in if they want. And I've gathered some good qualitative feedback, which is my favorite kind. Somebody said in the feedback that there are very incredible and nuanced bits of knowledge that I gained from the beginning of this challenge up till the present. I will most definitely use mostly all of the advice, pros and cons, and reasonings that are mentioned during the challenge in order to enhance my visibility and impact of my research. Great, that's all I want. So open access, tying it back into the theme of our conference. Obviously, Module 6 is about open access publishing. I love open access. I try to talk about it in every context that I can, pretty much, because I think that open research, when it's more findable, shareable, leads to that higher potential for impact, which can be really important. And all the altruistic things about making sure that our research is available worldwide to everybody. I'm a huge fan of all that. The content itself is CC BY. I mean, I've reused a lot of material from Stacy Conkeel's books to begin with. So please reuse anything that I have in my slides, adapt it. You can just take the link and put it straight into your LibGuides, whatever you want. That's currently where we have ours. So looking ahead, I think it could improve to have the research impact modules embedded into an actual website for better access and better tracking. Something like a WordPress or something, make them a little bit more just easy to find. Create a resource guide for others looking to run their own challenge, just with some of the things that you might want to consider if you wanted to adapt something like this at your own institution. And of course, we'll continue to update our modules with any emerging concepts and tools. So if you go to this QR code, it will take you to those research impact modules, or take a photo, and then that link will also take you there. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona, and I'd like to ask all other speakers to join us on the stage for a discussion. I love the CCBY, so I think it can be translated into Arabic and other languages, right? So yeah. So we got. I'd like to first thank all the speakers for very interesting presentations. And I do hope the audience have questions. I'll start the discussions with questions of my own because I was very excited. So I've got a question for each and following that kind of way of asking each way. I like that. So I'll start with Dr. Zaina. So, I mean, if you could explain to us how, I mean, just briefly, how the grant funding works in the UAE and whether if there's a grant that supports collaboration, would that help with the silos issue?
Yes, okay. So grant funding in the UAE is either an internal grant, which is through your institution, or an external grant, which is through an organization or the government. If, let's say, at my institution, every year we have the grant cycles. So we have these research incentive grants, which go up to about, I think, 300,000. They come out every year. So I could apply as a member of that institution with any project I want, as long as I'm the PI and I belong to that institution, and I can have on my team anyone I want from anywhere in the world. And this is applicable for all universities. If it were through an external body, not the university, for example, the Dubai Future Foundation, they have these cycles as well that they come up with, and then there's a grant call. Sometimes the conditions are, the PI needs to be a member of any university in the UAE. It doesn't matter where. Also, you can put together your group from whoever you want. It can be, inside the country. It can be outside the country, and then apply.
Are there any grants that kind of promote the idea of collaborations? Like they would say, you can get the grant if you can exhibit, you have multiple collaborations. Yeah.
Yes, some of the grants, depends on the grant. Like it depends also on the nature of the project. And so some of the grants, it asks for collaboration within 2 or 3 institutions. And sometimes the conditions are 2 institutions from within the nation and 1 external. Sometimes it would ask for, the PI to be UAE based, but the investigators are not UAE based. So depending on the grants, sometimes that's within the conditions. Absolutely.
Thanks so much. I move to Veronique and Thomas. There's one thing I wanted to kind of better understand because I missed that. With ERA, what is their scope? Are they kind of focused? That's not really my question, but I just want kind of clarification. Is it on UAE works or is it any work? Because the point you mentioned about licensing and contracts and whether kind of their policies or at least their guidelines override the contract law with, let's say, international publishers, or how does that work? I wasn't sure about kind of their scope.
Okay, there's a lot of parts there. Okay, their scope is essentially worldwide, with as used in the UAE. That is, they represent rights that originate in the UAE as well as rights that originate elsewhere. ERA, like a lot of other these common management organizations, belongs to an organization called IFRO, the International Federation of Reprographic Rights Organizations. And they basically all agree that the local organization will represent everybody's. And they have bilateral agreements with various other organizations like the one in the UK and the CCC in the US. And the rights kind of reciprocate. What were the other pieces?
Clarifies, but is it, so it's international, so even it would extend to the kind of the contracts that you would have with, let's say, international publishers as well.
Okay, they do not supersede primary licenses. It's a secondary license for reproduction of things that you otherwise legitimately have access to. And I will add that their scope is confined to literary works, things that are written, shall I say. So most of what we license falls within their scope, but for instance, video media does not.
Yeah, I think kind of the pressing question I had about fair use in UAE, especially right now in the age of AI, how does that work? I mean, they have like, I mean, it's not really specific to the library field, but many countries around the world, they're trying to develop their own LLMs. And I can say in Qatar, we don't have fair use. And that's a struggle that we have talking with research institutions who are trying to develop their own LLMs. And we tell them there's no fair use. And we look at the US, I mean, even the US, fair use isn't a strong argument. I guess the different cases, depending on, even with the Anthropic case right now, with the issue was with pirated use of the pirated books, not necessarily the copying of the books. In UAE and in the region, everyone's trying to kind of develop LLMs and kind of join the race of AI. So how does that work in the absence of fair use here? And if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, we saw in the guide that one of the exceptions to the law, or what isn't an exception to the law, is data mining. So you would need to have a license in order to do that data mining.
Yeah, they've addressed this at various conferences, meetings, and basically most RROs around the world will tell you that AI companies that are mining copyrighted content are violating copyright in the countries where they're at, including in the United States and the UK where there is fair use, and that those companies need to buy licenses from RROs.
That's exactly what we're telling companies, get your own license. Don't rely on fair use. But thanks for the answer. One more question for Fiona. With the kind of the last slide, you showed us kind of the impact and success, and I think it's really great. And as I mentioned, like it's amazing in CCBY because we heard earlier today about kind of linguistic barriers, and I think translating that content to Arabic and other languages would definitely help. My question comes with, I've seen like some faculty joining in the last year, and whether you can sense maybe there's an impact on them, whether this could also maybe lead to an AUS policy change at one point about research metrics, maybe about university rankings. And I don't know if you've seen this, but AUB, American University of Beirut, they decided to kind of be removed from kind of international rankings. And I think that's something interesting. And whether, I mean, maybe this is a far stretch now, but whether that had an impact on kind of, or may have an impact on how the university approaches research.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to say that AUS is like eschewing the rankings anytime soon. I think we're still pretty heavily pursuing them. So a lot of like 30% of QS and TAG are based on citation-based metrics. So any citation-based impact that happens to come from my challenge or by faculty focusing on that sort of goal will have some sort of impact on the rankings as well, which can only really be a positive. I think I'm more concerned with a little bit of academic freedom, publishing where is important to your discipline. But if there's some added benefits there for the university in terms of the rankings as well, then yeah, that's also very nice.
But do you think they will change the policy at one point, saying, let's have different alternative metrics at one point and step away from citation?
I couldn't comment on that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not privy to those conversations.
I mean,
yeah.
it'd be interesting to know, right?
Yeah.
But
would
maybe
be.
one more question for Dr. Zaina. Do you think kind of the research, impact literacy can help with the collaboration issue?
Absolutely. I think I find this to be amazing. And I have a question actually for her, if you don't mind.
And me for you.
We saw that there was, you said the challenge in the book is 5 to 30 days, right? And then you put together 8 modules. Do those 8 modules cover all the topics out of the 30 days? No. So when you finish all the faculty, you can go back to those 30 and then do another round, or?
Yeah, so I guess I read through the book and kind of took out, cherry picked the ones that I think thought would fit our institution best, or our researchers and kind of, research culture that we have here, and adapted those into the 8 that I took. Some universities only adapt them into 5, some adapt it into 10 or whatever. Mostly they're cherry picked, and you'll see most of them like social media, researcher profiles, kind of like the common ones come across pretty regularly. So I think especially with the ebook now, yes, there's 30, but it'll be like update your Twitter will be one, and then update your LinkedIn will be the next, whereas those are all encompassed by social media in mine. But I'm only asking, the participants to focus on 1 or 2 at a time. Like, you don't have to do everything that's in the module. Different disciplines are going to have different researcher profiles or social medias that suit them best, that sort of thing. So there's definitely plenty of content left in that book to be readapted into another one. Yeah.
I think I will try this idea. And I really like it. So
Yay.
She just gave me a new project to.
That's amazing.
work on, yeah.
And Fiona, you said you had a question, or?
I do. Did you say that there, in your first slide, there were 17% of the publications from the UAE had an international collaborator? Did I read that right?
From the study that I.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I was wondering where that data came from, because it's quite a bit lower than I would have thought. Yeah, okay. What, do you know
There's
when
some,
that data was collected?
Within the nation collaboration, we do have a lot, but internationally, it's not that high, and it should be higher. And this is something also we're working on in my college, at least, that we're trying to build those connections and those bridges with other colleges and other universities outside UAE, and actually outside the Arab region. This is what also matters more, because we find that, like, for example, I'm Lebanese, I have colleagues who are in Lebanon, and then we do, this collaboration, but we're trying to build out outside our region.
Which is also valued higher by the rankings as well. That's something that it's valued higher than like national
Yes,
or
exactly.
like local regional collaborations.
Exactly.
So there you go.
I need to recharge my moderation battery. So maybe we could we've got some questions from the audience, and then I do have one question that I'll ask all. Dr. Ahmad?
Ahmad Bashir from the American University of Iraq, Baghdad. I have 2 questions. It's the first one about the using materials to publish on the LMS for student, the learning management system. I know I don't work in UAE. I work outside UAE, so I'm not compelled to use their regulation. But about the fair use, I would like to know what's the fair use, the relation between the fair use and the publishing of materials, academic materials on the LMS. Okay. The other question is for the publishing impact. Perhaps you should be adding something about DORA and other institutions that are calling for qualitative impact as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll start with the question about posting items on Blackboard or other LMS. So here at AUS, we always encourage our faculty to link to items wherever possible. So if it's an article that's on Springer or ProQuest, please link to it. But there have been cases where people want a chapter or an article to post a PDF on Blackboard. And in the past, we relied on fair use exceptions like that you can make a copy of a single article or a few pages, 10% of a book, one chapter, and post it on an LMS for a limited amount of time. We sometimes we would say just for one semester, or just for a limited amount of time, and we would consider that a fair educational exception. But now we know that is not, there is no exception to the law. We would need a license with ERA to do that type of thing. In the UAE, I'm only talking about the UAE laws. Yeah.
You have them in the agreements, like with the publishers, like for example, let's say with big publishers, you include course pack use in there.
So we do have agreements, with the electronic resources we license, of course. So with ProQuest, with Springer, when we look at the terms of use in those licenses, they do say, yes, you can, email copies or do classroom handouts, for example. A lot of them do say that you should be linking to the items from an LMS rather than posting them. But yeah, we do look at the terms and conditions. So when I talk about posting things on an LMS and the fair use exceptions, I'm thinking about printed materials mostly. Yeah.
Do continue to buy rights from CCC for items that we're aware of, but of course, faculty can post things to the LMS without us knowing about it. So
Faculty do that all the time, right? Do you have any more questions? I guess from online or?
I'm 90% certain I mentioned Dora. If it's not in that module about publishing for impact, then it'll be in the metrics and alternative metrics section where I talk about responsible use. Oh, you want me to add a whole module on it? Yeah, okay, I'll think about that.
We have two questions online. The first one is for Fiona. Have you observed measurable changes in institutional research culture or funding success since implementing the Impact Challenge program?
Only on kind of a personal anecdotal level. People come to me and say that they really enjoyed it. I think it would be really interesting to do some sort of longitudinal study at some point with the people that register and then try to track them over a couple of years to see if they put it into practice. I think we're all guilty of learning certain tools and techniques and then not ever putting them into practice. So I do wish I had some amazing concrete example of that. I mean, when it comes to working with faculty, particularly with getting their research into our institutional repository, we've had a lot of concrete success with that in particular. When it comes to something for all of the modules, yeah, I can't comment.
Thank you. And the second question is, it's not directed to certain. How can open science initiatives address ethical concerns in research?
Who wants to pick that? So the question is, how can open science address ethical concerns in research? Kind of a very question. Is that the motive? Or no?
I mean, I think it's always great when people post their data online because then you can actually go through and see what their methodology was. So, in
Yeah, I
that
guess
sense, yeah.
it depends on what ethical concerns they're talking about. That's a pretty big question.
So many ethical questions. We should probably have just one conference for that. We have another question for Dr. Ahmad.
Question. Since, well, maybe it's out of the session, but since we have a copyright expert,
They did mention nothing.
Oh,
that
you
they
talk,
can-
you talk.
Can
at
be
least-
considered
at
as
least-
legal advice.
At
So.
least you're up to date about the copyright. I mean, let's say content, AI content, produced content, is it copyrighted?
in the US, no. I mean, that's, I think, settled law there, but in the UAE,
I'm not aware. I'm not aware.
Yeah.
You know, what was interesting about the 2021 text, it was the natural person. So that means that AI can't request copies, right?
Yeah.
That depends on which jurisdiction, right? It's different from one country to another. The US have different texts about this. I'm not aware of UAE. Qatar doesn't. I think maybe Saudi Arabia have something on there, so it'd be interesting to
I
know.
mean, what I read recently that only human produced content is copyrighted, not anything else. The other thing, I was reading an AI policy for students and they said even it's not plagiarism, but it's a breach or let's say it's a breach of integrity and it's academic integrity, but it's not even plagiarism. Yeah. They don't consider plagiarism.
I guess it depends. I mean, there's like also some institutions like computing science. Some of the faculty expect their students to use AI to create code. I don't know. So it depends, right? But not AUS. I'm talking on, but you have comments in there.
Well, I can comment to the current practice by some of the journals now. We have to declare. So whenever we're submitting now manuscripts to journals for academic publishing, a lot of the journals now are requiring the authors to declare if they have used AI or not, just to have that declaration there. So I think, it's not plagiarism because, you're co-writing, like the way I see it. I think you're co-writing with the AI. So you're not plagiarizing, you're collaborating. But as long as you declare that this is not completely 100% from you, the same way that we keep references and sources at the end of our article, having that declaration, I think that covers us ethically. Because if we don't do that, we have no right to put our name only on it and only our name, on an article that I've used AI to write or to even if it's just to generate the diet, whatever, if it's not fully 100% my work, I should have some kind of a declaration on there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with some declarations would also extend to use of editing tools, right? So not just kind of generative AI. I mean,
Yeah.
interestingly, like this laptop, I'm not promoting this laptop, but there's a physical button for Copilot. Basically, it's like I can just do Copilot while I'm writing, and should I declare that? I don't know. Yeah. We have one more question from Dr. Kamal.
Yeah, Dr. Kamal Belhamel from Dawaj. My question is about, as you know, that the copyright and the creation of CC license is making moved from the all right reserved to the some right reserved. And of course, the importance of CC license that think important is attribution. So I was surprising that in your presentation for my question is for Veronique, that the authorization or the need to be given by the institution, by government, not. I think the attribution is for the owner of the copyright. I mean, that you need to give the attribution to the authors or for the creators. So I don't understand why you ask for this license from government to the.
I was trying to argue that because copyright laws are getting more restrictive, that authors themselves should start to consider using Creative Commons licenses on their own work so that they can ensure that their work can be shared without the need for these blanket licenses. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
No, I mean, in your presentation, but the license need to be given by the government, not by because the license is, if, for example, work shared by CC BY, So we don't need the authorization from the owner. You have to share the work
Yeah, that's right.
without any authorization.
Okay, CC licenses are licenses. Okay, they're extra copyrightable, as it were. Copyright is the legal thing, what the government recognizes and lays out as the rights. The licenses are directly from the people who own the copyright to the people that they want to use it. It's a contractual arrangement that, you know, it has a basis in law, but it restricts further than copyright in some cases, and in other cases, it extends rights, provided the people consuming the goods, in some cases, pay the authors money in some form, or the publishers, or in the case of something like a CC license, if they abide by the terms of the license.
I'm gonna ask one last question, and I would like each kind of speaker to give one last sentence. Let's imagine it's 2030, and Kara decided that we will do the 9th or 10th forum again here in AUS, and we're meeting again in the same room and with the same speakers. When it comes to open science in the UAE, what would you like to have? What would you like to see change or develop in the next 5 years? And maybe we can go, maybe start for you and I will come back this way.
A big question. I guess, yeah, some national mandates, maybe some sort of national like repository for work to go into. That would, I think, go a long way. I think everybody's pretty on board with open research these days, but it has been a bit of a battle, you know, kind of fighting that like open access is predatory and everything like that. And so I'd like to see that have totally disappeared by 2030, I suppose. But I think the landscape's only going to get more complicated in some ways, especially with AI and all the paper mills and all these other things that are happening. So I don't really know.
I will answer this question from the perspective of a researcher. What I would like to see is more access across all the entities in the country. We're talking about UAE. I'd like to see a connection between all the universities and the government entities. I'd like to see this bridge between the private and the public, because for some reason, you talked about, I don't know who to call in the ministry. I don't know where to get this information in the ministry. We have a disconnect. So I would like to have one yeah, it's an issue. We do have a disconnect between public and private, and we need to all have access to that information together.
My dream will be that there'll be a new version of the law and it will give us some more exceptions to these copyright laws so that educational institutions and researchers can be assured that their use of copyrighted works are allowed without the need for purchasing a somewhat restrictively expensive license, which not all institutions can afford. So, yeah.
Thomas?
I'm of an age where I'm pessimistic enough to say that I hope that some form of open access to the bulk of the scholarly record survives, period.
What do you mean? Survive?
That it's still a thing. Okay, we're very high on open access at this point in the profession and within certain communities. But then on the other hand, to a certain extent, the way open access has been implemented, in some ways, it's a bit of a hack to improve citation counts. You know, we're still paying the publishers a lot of money in order for that to happen. And if the publishers don't get the money to publish, what are they going to turn to next?
There's a lot to think about there. I mean, these are open questions we don't know the answers to, right? The more we do it, the more questions that we have, and the more integrity, research ethics questions come up. Luckily, we have more sessions in this conference that will tackle some of these issues. I'd like to thank all the speakers for wonderful presentations and your energy today.
Thank
And
you.
thank all the attendees for your attention and your questions. And I guess coffee is served soon. Yes. So you're welcome for having 5 more minutes of coffee.
Thanks,
Thanks so much.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.